one more short story. Hello, and thank you for joining us again on One More Short Story, the bite-sized audiobook podcast featuring stories from the world of writing battle. I'm Chris Forwells, and I'm looking forward to sharing these stories with you today. With today's stories, I have broken my self-imposed limit of 4 stories. We've gone for 5, and there's a very, very good reason for that. This episode is centered around the current writing battle Warlock class. Now, if you're into writing battle, you'll know what I mean. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, essentially these stories have a similar theme of horror or suspense or terror. So, those of a nervous disposition, maybe look away now, etc., etc. As ever, if you look at the links, you'll see you can go to the stories directly and check out any content warnings if that's something that you find helpful when you're listening to these stories. Now, we've got some terrific stories today, and I insisted on including on these 5 together, even though it took me over the limit. It's my limit, I made it up. Anyway, I shall stop boring you with my internal struggles and get cracking. We are going to dive straight in with a terrific story from last year's Fear battle, the 1,000-word professionally judged battle. It's by Casey Moss and it's called The Red Car. The prompts were horror, mechanic and flask. It's read by Ryan Paige, who's done a couple of stories for us already, and you get a superb deal with Ryan narrating your story. So here we go. Here is The Red Car by Casey Moss, narrated by Ryan Paige.
This is the first and last time I'm ever buying something off Craigslist. After an uninsured driver totaled my car during a reckless U-turn on the highway, I needed something cheap, something just to get me from point A to point B. Rentals were a joke made by the rich, Facebook Marketplace was full of scams, and Carvana was too expensive. So, Craigslist was my last resort. 4 sellers ignored me completely. 1 tried to sell me drugs from a different state. The 6th finally replied. The username, "It wasn't him, the car did it," should have been my first warning. But the price was too good to pass up. The seller was a woman in a dark hoodie. She said the car's owner, her boyfriend, was in jail for a hit and run. She needed bail money, and the car was the first to go. The car, a heavily dented red Honda Accord, sat under the flickering light behind a gas station. As she handed me the keys, she hesitated. "The car might be haunted," she whispered. "He said it was driving itself. He slammed on the brakes, but it wouldn't stop." "I'll get the brakes checked." I forced out a laugh. She didn't laugh back. The key had a worn rabbit's foot attached. Maybe my luck was turning around. My mechanic, Axel, gave it a once-over. Other than a deep dent in the hood and a small cut he got while working under it, everything was fine. His only concern was that the car was still warm after being off for a while. We made plans for repairs as he bandaged his finger. When I left the shop, I swore the dent looked smaller. The car handled beautifully, so I treated it to a clean. I washed it, vacuumed it, and tried not to think about the woman's warning. Under the seats, I found cigarette butts and a napkin smudged with lipstick. Dark red, almost brown. For a second, I thought it was blood. That night, a deer darted across the road. I slammed the brakes, but the deer slammed harder. The impact rocked the car. I climbed out, cursing, and dragged the body off the hood. "I just got you cleaned," I grumbled to myself as I inspected the damage. The smell was awful. Blood, fur, and rot. The windshield wasn't cracked, though it looked like it was from inside the car when the deer's body was still on it. The hood looked fine too, the dent somehow softer. By morning, the only trace of the accident was a faint brown smear I couldn't scrub off. The next week, I brought it back to Axel's garage. He reeked of whiskey. When I spotted a dented silver flask peeking from his pocket, I eyed him warily. "Wife kicked me out," he muttered. As he worked under the car, lifted in the air, he scraped something off the bumper and frowned. "What have you been running over, man? There's fur and dried blood caked under here." "I guess the car's hungry," I said jokingly. The car's headlights flickered as the rabbit foot key ring sat in my hand. The engine roared to life. The lift groaned, metal shrieking as the car spun its wheels. Before Axel could react, the lift collapsed. The car dropped, slamming him beneath its weight. The sound was a wet, final crunch. My ears rang. The engine revved again, idling over his body. I stumbled backward, tripping over his flask as whiskey poured out on the concrete. Then I saw it. His blood, pooling around the tires and vanishing. The red paint grew brighter by the second. The dent in the hood smoothed out completely. It looked brand new. Axel didn't move. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The car rumbled softly, headlights glowing like eyes in the dark. The car turned its wheels toward me. My hand reached for my phone to call the police, but I froze. No one would believe me. The headlights flicked a warning. The wipers swept across the glass like a blink. My heart thudded in my ears. I swallowed. "Hey, buddy," I said, voice trembling. You full now?" The engine growled, low and satisfied, then cut off. Silence filled the garage. I stared at Axel's mangled body, at the fixed red hood, at the rabbit's foot clenched in my hand. It didn't look lucky anymore. It looked like a trap. I told myself I'd sell the car, but every time I thought about it, a sinking feeling in my stomach would stop me. I kept driving. The car drove perfectly. It stopped smoothly, accelerated fast, but it was always warm when I touched the hood. When the tank's half empty, I feel it hum louder, and the dent reappears like a starved stomach. The steering wheel twitches. The headlights scan the roadside like it's hunting. Last week, a stray dog ran in front of me, and I didn't swerve. I let go of the steering wheel. The next morning, the dent was gone again. Now I keep Axel's dented flask in the trunk as a warning to myself. Whenever the engine growls or the steering wheel pulls toward the shoulder, I drop my own blood into the gas tank. Enough to keep it calm. I tell myself it's superstition, that cars don't drink blood, that it was all a freak accident that my brain manipulated into something sinister. But every time I glance at the hood in the moonlight, I see the faint shape of a face stretched across the metal. I think it's Axel. Sometimes the radio turns on by itself, and I hear static that sounds almost like words, almost like screams. When I drove past the cellar 3 months later, still in that same hoodie, I couldn't look her in the eye. Because I think she knows I know the truth, and still keep it. That it wasn't haunted, but hungry, waiting for someone else to feed it. I keep feeding it.
There we go. I hope you weren't just about to go to sleep listening to this episode because, yeah, like all good horror, Casey's done a fantastic job there in making a really unsettling story. One of the many things I like about that story is it starts off sort of fun and a bit silly and relatable, that's the last time I buy something off Craigslist, etc., etc. And then by the end, gives me goosebumps even now. Thank you, Ryan, for your excellent narration as ever. That story got to the Sweet 16, the final 16 in the knockout stages. Well done, Casey. Okay, moving on to our second story, Hard Bargain by R.L. Lynn. This was in the spring battle last year, the 500 words, in the small town secrets genre. Rebecca's prompts were small town secrets, antique store, and art critic. We've actually got a bit of a family affair here, in that Rebecca's sister has narrated it for us. So Rebecca's sister, Emily Lange, is narrating this. So here we go. This is Hard Bargain by R.L. Lynn, narrated by Emily Lange.
Jason Townsend pushed through the creaky front door and instantly knew he was in the presence of greatness. It didn't matter that the antique store was practically crumbling into dust, or that it was located in the middle of the Arizona desert. In Jason's experience, these were the shops that contained the most delectable hidden treasures, often owned by folks who were none the wiser. Inside was nearly as hot as the oppressive Arizona sun was outside, and reeked of rosewood and patchouli. Jason didn't mind. The frail, elderly woman behind the counter only served to heighten his excitement. A sucker if he ever saw one. "Afternoon," he drawled, a practiced smirk sliding over his handsome, boyish features. "Got anything good?" "That depends," the woman answered, giving an enigmatic smile. She appeared in her early 90s, but Jason was startled by her bright green eyes. They looked unnatural against the haggard features and short, frazzled hair. Slightly unsettled, he began to browse. After 10 minutes, it was apparent that most of the merchandise was junk. He was starting to get discouraged when a painting, peeking from behind a musty sofa, drew his attention. Pulling it out, he nearly choked. It was Manet's Chez Tortoni, stolen in 1990. While numerous, highly skilled forgeries had surfaced since, the original was never recovered. Worth about $10 million, it was a monumental find for anyone in the art world. Feigning a nonchalant air, he hauled the painting up front, heartbeat thudding in his fingertips. "How much?" The wizened woman peered at the peeling price tag. "Says 500, she croaked. 500? Jason exclaimed. "That's an outrage. I'll give you 100. Sunken green eyes bore into his. 400, she countered. 150. She paused, considering. 250. Final offer. 225. Or I walk, Jason rasped, his eyes watering. He waited, breath bated, squinting at her blurred image. Damn dust allergies. She finally agreed, sweeping her white hair over one shoulder. Jason counted the bills, hands trembling in anticipation. Well, you drive a hard bargain, she conceded, her voice honey-glazed. Jason barely heard her. Grabbing his prize, he moved toward the door, a sharp pain radiating in his chest. Wheezing, he stumbled out into the Arizona heat. Elspeth waited until her customer's stooped, rapidly graying figure disappeared before gliding to an ornate cracked mirror. Sagging skin tightened into sharp cheekbones while her long white hair slowly bled red. Thick eyelashes sprouted, accentuating green, upturned eyes. Her ruby lips curved in a satisfied smile. She hadn't looked this young in decades. Customers were rare, and she could only harvest a proportional amount of vigor from each victim. Most souls were not so corrupted. Until today. Elspeth strode to a locked closet, relishing in her newly spry muscles. Unlocking it, she eyed the small stack of Manet forgeries. Her supply was low. She would need to paint more soon. Grabbing one, she relocked the closet before staging the new forgery behind the ratty sofa. From somewhere outside came an anguished scream.
It's a really neat idea, the the setting up of the horrible grasping character and the innocent doddery old lady behind the counter, and then just nicely twisting that, giving Jason his just desserts when he's trying to swindle the old lady behind the counter. And he absolutely deserves, well, maybe that's a bit harsh, saying he absolutely deserves it, but you can see where she was coming from. I'm not saying I would, draw out someone's life force to make myself younger. But now that you mention it, one to think about. That story in the small town secrets genre just missed out on the knockout stages. It got 6 wins, 4 losses, honourable mention. I've been there many times with the honourable mention. So, Rebecca, I get it. I know what that feels like. But this is, not to be sniffed at. It is an excellent piece of work. And thank you, Emily, for reading it for us. Our next story comes from the first battle of 2026 in the secret dungeon genre. The story is called The Glass Ceiling, and it's written by Eilish Forwells. I'm not going to spoil this one. You're going to enjoy it. The prompts were Secret Dungeon, Overachiever, and Hourglass. Now, those of us who are more civically minded will already have an impression of what the glass ceiling could and may mean. I shall say nothing. I shall let Eilish's excellent work, narrated by Maverick Jones, take it away. Here is The Glass Ceiling.
Waking up inside a clear glass box only happened in movies. It wouldn't happen to me. Until it did. I noticed the lights first. They were harsh and made my eyes water. I blinked through the pain. My head was pounding hard enough to feel the blood racing through my veins. Everything felt unfamiliar. The mattress beneath me was hard, the air stale and thick with the stench of mold. This wasn't my room. There were no dying houseplants by the bed, no empty wine bottles, no abandoned laptop still warm from another night spent chasing deadlines. No voicemails from my sister Emily asking if I'd ever be free. It wasn't even a room, just a clear glass box. The mattress on a metal bed frame and a large hourglass bolted to a wall. The top of the box towered above me, a square cut into it and covered by a grate showing only darkness beyond. Outside, I could see a wooden floor as far as the lights would allow. After that, nothing. Just another layer of confinement. I hit the glass until my hands went numb. Then I kept going. When I finally gave in to exhaustion, my palms were swollen and my throat shredded from screaming. I started hyperventilating when I realized there was no food or water. I flipped the mattress, scraped my fingers along every seam, every corner, searching for cracks, flaws, or a glowing green exit sign pointing towards salvation. There was nothing. Eventually, panic burned itself out. I slowed my breathing, reaching for the techniques from those mindfulness sessions Emily had pushed me to go when stress made my hair fall out. It ended badly when I accused her of not committing enough. She told me not everything needed a winner. I folded into myself, knees tight to my chest, and let the tears come. I rested my head against the glass and wondered how long it would take for anyone to notice I was gone. My boss would be furious. I couldn't remember why impressing him mattered. I had survived on black coffee, CrossFit, and ambition.
Using Chablis to knock myself unconscious.
All of it for the next promotion, the next title. being a senior director meant nothing here. Emily would assume I was traveling for work. I'd promised to call her. I'd promised it would be all different after this promotion. It would probably take a month before she found the silence strange. We used to spend afternoons trawling charity shops for bargains, pretending we'd resell them as a side hustle. Most of the time they ended up in our wardrobes instead, worn thin 6 months later. We made up stories about how the women who owned them before, a judge, a rich divorcee, a glamorous mafia boss wrapped in fur. Women who had power. Women I had wanted to be. Hours slipped by. Maybe a whole night. The oppressive glare of the lights made time impossible to measure. I was half asleep when the glass trembled beneath my cheek. Metal clanged overhead, and I looked up just as the hourglass rotated on its mount. The grate in the top slid back, revealing a cast iron pipe. Freezing water slammed down onto my head. It poured through the pipe in a violent, endless rush, soaking the mattress and flooding the floor. Within seconds, it was around my ankles. I tilted my face into the edge of the stream and swallowed greedily. Salt burned my tongue. I choked, gagging, spitting it back out. The water kept rising. The bed began to lift beneath the thundering current. I lurched forward. I grabbed the bed frame and hurled it into the wall. It rebounded instantly, slamming into my stomach. I folded and stumbled backward, my head cracking against the opposite wall. The impact punched the breath from my lungs. My vision smeared, and I fought just to stay upright. The glass wasn't even scratched. The hourglass kept draining. In that moment, it wasn't the corner office that brought my fight back. It was the promise I made to my sister, one I intended to keep. I shoved the bed against the wall and wrenched the frame onto its side. Water swirled around my hips. I climbed onto the frame and reached for the hourglass, fingertips scraping the glass. I yanked at it. It didn't shift. It would have to hold because I wasn't about to start losing. I hauled myself up using the hourglass as a grip and launched my body upward, catching the edge of the opening. Those early morning classes had been worth it. My arms trembled. I didn't have time to think, so I just threw both hands around the pipe and pulled it as hard as I could. I fell. My body plunged back into the water and cold locked around me like an iron grip. I kicked free, shoved off the wall, and broke the surface. My feet no longer touched the floor. The pipe had violently bent to the right, ripping through the top like a broken bone through skin. And beyond it, light. I lunged toward it, drawn upward like a plant starved of the sun. I clawed at the edge and forced myself through the gap. I had made it out. I felt the adrenaline surge in, and despite my fatigue, leaped into the air and gave the still flooding box the middle finger. "I beat you!" I shouted. The light vanished the moment I got to my feet. There was a faint smell of disinfectant, and a screen flashed on.
Performance review. Subject 0147. Subject demonstrated exceptional willingness to exceed physical limitations to meet objective.
Suitability for promotion requires further testing.
Go through the red door to progress the application.
I was wrong. Here, being senior director meant everything. A red door slid open, revealing a long corridor. On the other side of the room, a green exit sign flickered on. I stepped through the red door. Of course I did. I'm a winner.
What struck me when I first came across that story, apart from the terrific description of the suspense and the sheer terror of being stuck in a box, was as the main character was going through rethinking their life under pressure, etc., and then amazingly breaking out of that box, suddenly being presented with the option of continuing with whatever dystopian application process it was, going straight back into sort of power mode, into, yeah, okay, of course I would. Of course I went through that door. I'm a winner. You can just, your heart sort of sinks for them. Yeah, I knew as soon as I came across that story earlier this year that I wanted to feature it on this episode. It got to the last 64, the sensational 64 in that battle. So very strong work, because there were, there were about 500 or 600, I think, entrants into that genre. It was very, very popular. Lots of aspiring horror writers out there in the writing battle community. Story number 4 today is a slight throwback. It goes back to the spring battle in 2024 in the witchcraft genre. It is Lest Ye Be Judged by Allison Hall. Very excited to have Allison's work on the podcast. She's a multiple battle winner, and if you've not come across this story before, you're about to see why. Allison was kind enough to let me narrate this. So, in terms of her prompts, Allison had witchcraft, swamp, and loner, and it's a real for me, it's a real study of just what a writer can do in 500 words to set up the world, the atmosphere, the character, and I shall save any more of my waffling till afterwards. Here we go. This is Allison Hall's Lest Ye Be Judged, narrated by me. We pray for the girl with the rocks in her pockets. The girl. To say her name would give her power. She listens to our accusations, head held high, a smile at the corners of her lips. She shows no remorse for what she's done. We avert our eyes, avoid her piercing green gaze. We will not be drawn in by her spell. The girl's toes press against the moist earth while we sink into the sludge, Sunday shoes soiled. Last autumn, our parents whispered of witches. We know the words by heart. We've watched the townsfolk recite them as we hid behind the skeletal figures of dying trees and inhaled the thick stench of decay wafting on the breeze. We've watched the women beg and plead as they saw the truth push ever closer around them. But the girl is silent. We pray for the girl, her hands and ankles bound by twine, as she falls into the water. She is not one of us. She runs barefoot through the forest, a mangy cat her only friend. We've seen her crush roots and berries, make grassy scented tea for her ailing mother, turn the doctor away from their door. We spend our days at school, where we recite commandments and learn the importance of remaining pure and chaste. We've watched from the window as she lazed in the meadow alone, drawing plants in her notebook. We tried not to notice the dip of her delicate wrist as her pencil flew over the page. The swamp will be her judge. We pray for the girl as she slips beneath the surface. Her face is marred by murky water, her ghostly apparition sinks into the gloom. The frogs sing their midnight song. In the church, we listen to her stammer through Bible verses, her face blushed with the devil's glow, as the congregation shifted in nervous unison. The tear in the neck of her hand-me-down dress, her wild hair loose over her shoulders, a forbidden glimpse of her collarbone. Is she a witch? Or merely an evil temptress, one who compels us to feel things we are not supposed to feel? She makes us act in unspeakable ways. How her legs spill out from the too small skirt, the curve of her chest pushed against the worn-out fabric, the warmth of her smooth skin beneath our palms, the taste of strawberry on our lips. We ask God to forgive us. It was not our fault. The moon bears witness. It peeks through the beards of Spanish moss that drip from the arms of the cypress trees. A ripple. A splash. We pray for ourselves as she rises from the water, emerald eyes turned to fire. There we are. Allison Hall is something of a short fiction powerhouse. That's not the only battle she's won. She absolutely did win in a very competitive knockout stage of the Witchcraft stories, so very well done, Allison, there. I like so much about that story. The way it sets up this poor sort of tragic figure and the slightly annoying sanctimonious style of the narrator and the community in which they're in, and then you find out more and more about their failings and their terrible actions, and have they been acting in a pure and chaste way? Probably not. And just when you think this is just another story of some poor, completely innocent young woman being treated appallingly, Allison turns it on its head at the end, with the girl rising out with fire in her eyes, and I couldn't help but feel vindicated on her behalf. Perhaps that says something about me. I don't know. But yes, excellent story in 500 words. Thank you, Allison. Our final story today is from the most recent battle, the Tempest Raven battle, and it's Pay the Rent by Sam James. We've had Sam on the show before, both his stories and his narration. He's narrated this one himself. It's excellent. I mean, like I always say, I don't put episodes on here unless I think they're really, really good. I think Sam's gone in a direction with this which I don't think I'd ever have envisaged. It is unique, if I can say unique beyond belief. I don't know if that's a thing, but it's really, really strong stuff. This was in the origin story genre of the last battle, and a load of really good, really creative stories came out of that, people's origin stories or situations' origin stories. Sam's prompts were origin story, landlord, and wreath. Sam's taken his strong opinions about landlords and renting and that sort of life and how that works and feels and is, and he's just ramped it up into something quite special. I will say no more other than I hope you're not trying to get to sleep while listening to this podcast. Here is Sam James narrating his own story, Pay the Rent.
$550, $600, $650. I pay the rent in cash, and it has to be exact. One time, I was a few pennies short, and the rent screamed until I fed it enough loose change. The rent that is, the tear in the kitchen wall into which my rent money disappears, is glowing black. It shouldn't be possible to glow black, but around the first of every month, a dark, hungry wash emanates from the rent, letting me know payment is due. 700, 720, 725. Perfect. I elastic band the bulk of my month's earnings together and feed it to the rent. It gurgles happily and the black glow recedes. But as I turn away, it whines. A piteous sound that swells to a wail. I don't understand. I gave it enough. I pat my pockets, and the resultant jingle seems to assuage the rent somewhat. In they go. How much was that? Another couple of quid? Not so bad if it quietens. Oh, no. The rent is still screaming. I scrabble down the back of the sofa. In the pocket of my winter coat, every last coin I have goes into the rent, but it is ravenous. I feed it my credit card, my phone, the contents of my freezer. The black glow consumes all. And this is how I live, for months. My ears ache from the constant background shriek, and my kitchen is cloaked in shade. The walls blister around the tear. I pick up double shifts, and the rent continues gorging. My TV, my record collection, my car keys, all gone. It eats my dog. Fumbling in the near total dark, I tie one end of a rope around the fridge, the other around my waist. My ears are plugged with cotton wool. I'm going in. The fluorescent tube in the kitchen long ago lost the fight against the rent's glow, and I navigate by touch. Running my fingertips along the wall, I follow the trail of bubbling paintwork. The abscesses get larger, denser, as I approach the rent, until I hit a thick wreath of blisters on blisters surrounding the edge. The edge. I'd always imagined the rent would be sharp, scraggly to the touch, but it's not. It's oddly fleshy, like burnt lips, cracked and raw. The screaming is overwhelming, the air thick with the noise and the stench of decay. I suppress the instinct to gag, to run, to find something to feed the rent. But I don't have anything else. I pull myself in. There is a rush of wind, and I land with a squelch. I'm in a wet corridor with pink, meat-like walls, lit with a smeary fluorescence sucked in from my kitchen. Debris litters the way. My nice saucepan is embedded in one of the walls. The howling is more muted here, but more directional. I follow it, rope trailing behind me. After a few dozen clammy footsteps, the corridor bends, there's my microwave, and opens out into a large atrium. It is full of the objects of my life, furniture, electronics, and miscellaneous detritus piled high. The screams pour down from atop the mound. I ascend in fits and starts, slipping on loose socks and silverware. I crest the summit to see the back of my sofa. Beyond it, my TV is playing some reality show, but I can't hear it over the screen. The source is right in front of me. Tentatively, terrified, I round the sofa. A middle-aged man sits there. He's wearing a quarter-zip fleece and blue jeans. But for the setting, and the fact his jaw is fixed wide in a scream, a completely ordinary bloke. He is petting my dog. It takes all of my resolve to not immediately launch myself at the man. I edge nearer, tense. As I do so, there is a sudden cessation. I have lived with a backdrop of screaming for so long that its absence unbalances me, and I trip over Rex's dog bowl. The man doesn't flinch at the clatter. He sits there, jaw now mercifully closed, one hand on the remote, the other scratching Rex behind the ears. Rex's tail thumps against the sofa cushions, my sofa cushions. "You're overdue," says the man, conversationally, not looking at me. I want to yell at him, demand my dog back, but my throat is dry and all I can manage is, "Rex. By rights, I should evict you. Instead, I'd like to offer you an alternative." He produces a document and hands it to me. "Sign this. 30 years and you'll never have to pay the rent again." The sheet of paper reads, "Death Pledge Offer." I scan it briefly, but I am at the end of my rope. Literally. It is dense with small print, debt, terms, interest rates, none of it sticks. The only thing left echoing round my mind, never have to pay the rent again. I sign. Careless, perhaps, desperate, but then I am desperate. The moment the pen leaves the page, the rope around my waist goes slack. An intangible weight has been lifted. The man takes the signed contract with a smile. "All yours," he says, and stands. Without another word, he clambers down my heaped possessions and leaves. I rush over to the sofa and bury my nose into Rex. A comforting smell. Home. And that's when the hunger kicks in. I am starving, famished beyond belief. It is painful, such emptiness, such a hollow ache. The atrium seems to dim around me. I look down. A dark glow is seeping from my chest. A soft thud captures my attention. A small pile of cash, exactly £725, has appeared at the mouth of the corridor. Just as suddenly as the hunger arrived, I am sated. But it doesn't last. A month passes, my appetite returns. The hollow feeling is back, low and gnawing. 550, 600, 650. I don't remember fetching the money, but as I count it, I can feel the hunger quelling. 700, 720. Almost. It isn't exact. I scream.
I don't know how Sam managed to do that. I don't know how Sam managed to make this surreal, unsettling, satirical, really powerful piece of work in just 1,000 words. Anyone who's ever rented and laying in bed wondering about payments and whatnot and contemplating their life will have no doubt resonated with that story, or have that story resonate with them. I'm saying resonate a lot. Sam did such a good job with that one. He did all the audio production himself. I can't pretend that any of that lovely stuff, beginning or throughout or at the end there, was me. That was all him. He knows his way around an audio production as well as writing. How dare you? Sam was the runner-up in this year's competition with that story, and it could have gone either way. The winning story was fantastic. Sam's story was fantastic. Just a very high caliber of writing in Writing Battle these days. So yeah, well done, Sam. Thank you for listening to One More Short Story with me, Chris Forwell. We'll see you next time.